Hello, Internet. Daniel with Driving Dragons back. This time we're doing a reaction video, and we are going to be reacting to We Love TTRPGs and his discussion of the different editions of Dungeons and Dragons and which one is the best. I'm going to do a couple of these because there's a few different channels that have different breakdowns of the different editions, and I think it'd be fun to kind of go through them and add my 2 cents. And this is one of the shorter ones, so it serves as a pretty decent little lead-in or primer for future videos. 280ZX, we continue to work on the valve cover and to paint it and get it shined up and looking real nice. And I've actually got a little bit of progress I've made on the timing issues and on the rough idle situation. So that car may even be drivable here real soon. So we're going to go ahead and get into this. This is We Love TTRPGs, discussion of which is the best edition of Dungeons and Dragons, and let's see how much I agree and disagree.
Hello, welcome to We Love TTRPGs. In this video, I'm going to answer the question of which edition of Dungeons and Dragons is the best. Now, for clarity, this isn't a question that keeps me up at night. However, I've seen many arguments around this debate on social media. In fact, that's where you'll typically encounter older players insisting that 5th edition sucks and only 1st or 2nd edition advanced D&D are good. Well, I'm going to solve this debate once and for all. I've been playing D&D since when this was a new thing. This is the Holmes Basic Set from 1977. When I purchased this, I didn't really have any idea what it was or aware that there was even older versions of the game, such as this. My interest in the game was the result of seeing some Grenadier miniatures boxes in the toy department of a pharmacy. Looked like little metal medieval army men with weird monsters. I wanted to know what they were for. Later that day, my best friend's brother told us about Dungeons and Dragons, explaining it was a very complicated game and I didn't have the intelligence for it.
He's actually doing a pretty good impersonation of some of the more socially inept grognards out there who are practically only listened to because they have Twitter accounts and you don't see them for the rest of their life. And the chief among those, I would say, would be the Condor DMs and the Jeffro types, where it's just like so obnoxious, it's not even funny. But if he's going to settle this once and for all, and I'm going to go ahead and say it now, I've not actually seen this video despite it being a year old. But there's only one way to settle this, and there's only one true correct answer. The best edition, hands down, is the one you enjoy playing at your table and the one that you get the most use out of for the style of play that you like. The game systems and the game rules are a tool. They are a tool to facilitate you having an enjoyable time. So that's the only true correct answer. Everything else is subjective and personal preference. Now, there is a debate to be had about which systems have the most versatility, which editions are the easiest to pick up and play, which editions are the most favorable to new players or support a certain type of play or a certain type of player. And there's also ones that are which ones are easier to play consistently or to support a broader community game like, Living Eberron, Living Greyhawk, or whatever, where you have more organized play where consistency is a necessity. But at the end of the day, those are different debates than really what is the best edition. And they really kind of fall into which is the more modular or the more adaptable or the more versatile edition. So let's continue and see what he has to say.
Well, challenge accepted. Oh yeah, I still haven't let that one go. I'm like a crow. I hold grudges. So this Holmes edition includes a short sample dungeon, and I ran it for my friends many times. That's how I learned the rules. It wasn't long before I wanted more. And that's when I moved on to the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 1st edition. And I've played every version since, with the exception of 4th edition, which I will discuss later. Before explaining which version or edition of the game is the best, let's discuss our options. Is the Chainmail game from 1971 by Gary Gygax and Jeff Perrin the best version? Chainmail is considered to be the predecessor to Dungeons & Dragons. is Gary adopted many of the rules from Chainmail to create the first edition of D&D. Chainmail was focused on medieval warfare and included a set of rules for resolving combat between different types of units. Maybe the best version was the original D&D RPG from 1974. This version was the true first edition and was created by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson. It was a box set that included 3 booklets: Men and Magic, Monsters and Treasure, and the Underworld and Wilderness Adventures. The rules were simple and focused on dungeon crawling and exploration. Or maybe the best version was my basic Dungeons & Dragons from 1977. This box set was designed to be an entry point for new players that included a simplified set of rules and was aimed at younger audiences. Then in 1981, the D&D Expert Set was released. It was designed to be a companion to the basic set and provided additional rules and options for players who wanted to expand their game beyond the introductory levels. The Expert Set included a new rulebook, an adventure module titled The Isle of Dread, and a set of dice. My best friend purchased the Expert Set at the same time I bought the basic set. Unfortunately, his mother eventually burned all of his D&D books when she discovered that we weren't actually just playing a creative game of the imagination, but instead summoning Lucifer to do his bidding.
Gotta love a throwback to the Satanic Panic. But just a quick little primer here, a little input on more or less the entirety of first edition, even up to and including advanced, which I'm assuming he'll get to here shortly. I would say that the replayability of all of first edition is probably one of its strongest suits. A lot of grognards, and especially the bro SR guys, make me laugh because of how they act like the original Dungeons and Dragons and first edition AD&D was so strict on the rules, and that this rule 0 thing was meant to be just kind of a filler while they were filling in the gaps in the rules, and it wasn't really meant to be a thing that was used to adapt the game to your table and whatnot. And they're some of the most religious about things like rules as written and rules overruling. And they always point back to these original editions, which is hilarious because honestly, I think the originals were, when you played all the way up through the first edition advanced Dungeons and Dragons, when I look at that, what I see is a framework of a game. It is the skeleton of a game, and it is instinctively designed for you to flesh things out. But it has a great deal of replayability, mainly because, like he said before, he played that same adventure over and over and over again to learn the rules and whatnot. Well, how do you play the same adventure over and over and over again without everybody getting bored? And not just, I play a different class, or I play a different this, or the dice make things different, but the prevalence of random tables, random rolls, and that sort of thing that happened in these games allowed them to be very versatile and very different without you having to put in a tremendous amount of work preparing your game and writing, which is one of the strongest parts of first edition, if you ask me.
That's right. The Satanic Panic was the most ridiculous version of cancel culture yet. Also in 1977, we saw the release of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, commonly called First Edition AD&D. This was a more complex version of the game building on the rules established in the original D&D. It was split up into 2 main hardback rulebooks, the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide. A third book, the Monster Manual, was also released as a supplement. I spent many, many days and nights throughout the 80s playing the first edition AD&D game. Oh, those 12-hour marathon gaming sessions on weekends were the best. Then we were blessed with the second edition AD&D released in 1989. This edition was a major revision of the game designed to be more accessible with a better presentation and refinement of the previous edition. And I played second edition AD&D from 1989 until the year 2000. When the third edition Dungeons & Dragons was released. Third edition introduced...
He's about to go into my favorite edition, to be honest, third 3.5. Second, I don't really have the rose-tinted glasses for second edition that a lot of people do. I started with second. And I think second is probably where the rules overrulings and drift away from Rule Zero being a true part of the game master lexicon and whatnot. It happened there. It is almost as a side effect of the Hickman Revolution. I think the Hickman Revolution was probably the best thing that ever happened to Dungeons and Dragons. It really, the narrative gameplay is really where Dungeons and Dragons, every edition, truly excels. That is where it really puts out the creativity, and the flexibility it gives the dungeon master is what really makes it such a unique game that can have such broad appeal. However, when second edition, now it did some good things, like it refined and standardized some things. It got rid of some of the tables that were unnecessary. It really lent itself more towards a game that was home written, if not home brewed. But second edition also started to sanitize away a lot of the character of the game and a lot of the variety in the different character classes, races, that sort of thing, as it started to strive for more uniformity and more balance. But it still kept some of the quirky, archaic, vestigial organs of wargaming, things like THACO and Descending Armor class, which are one and the same, that were from first edition, but really probably should have been on the short list to get rid of, in my opinion. Second edition also had a tremendous amount of low quality bloat. The OGL in third edition is what solved this. It allowed you to have the vast quantity of modular resources that were really necessary to keep the engine churning and the economic side of the game running. Because let's face it, you could really just buy the 3 core rule books, or really not even the 3 core rule books. You could have the Player's Handbook and Monster Manual and play a virtually infinite number of games. So you have to keep people coming back, buying and buying and buying, and the easiest way to do that is more stuff. Well, if you're doing it all yourself like TSR did, you're going to have to just shit all over the quality, because there's only so many people that can write so many books and do so much quality control. OGL solved that by basically throwing it out to the masses. Plenty of garbage came out from the OGL. There are, for every one book or one module or one supplement that was worth a crap that came from a third-party publisher under the OGL, there were probably hundreds of garbage trash that nobody has picked up since and everybody has forgotten. But to me, second edition, second and fourth have something in common. And that is that both of them suffer from narrow focus and having a selection of some of the worst qualities of their predecessors enhanced. But second edition is still, for me, I'd say probably my third favorite.
Introduced many new mechanics, including the D20 system. Should we point out that it was only 3 years earlier in 1997 when Wizards of the Coast purchased TSR, the company that originally owned Dungeons & Dragons. At the time of the acquisition, TSR was struggling financially. This acquisition included all of TSR's intellectual property, including Dungeons & Dragons, as well as the company's employees and facilities. Wizards of the Coast was the creators of the popular Magic the Gathering card game, a game that was itself a derivative of Dungeons & Dragons, with its creators looking to turn D&D into as simple a format as possible. Thus, the card game was born. Third edition D&D soon became 3.5, when just 3 years later, in 2003, the revised 3.5 edition was released in an attempt to address many of the balance issues and rules clarifications that arose from the third edition.
I'm going to go ahead and interject here on 3.5, and some of this is speculation on my part, and there may be evidence to the contrary that I just haven't seen out there. But I've always held the belief that third edition was always supposed to be 3.5. As he said, the acquisition of TSR by Wizards of the Coast happened only 3 years before these books hit the shelves. And we all know that TSR already had third edition under development before they were bought out. Now, instead of finishing the development and doing more research, more play testing, getting more things going, and what was a very necessary change, the standardization, the streamlining of the rules, The D20 system is far more elegant than old school D&D. But what I believe happened is Wizards needed to get Wizards Dungeons and Dragons out. They needed to get a version out that was their copyright, that had their name on it, that was using their intellectual property, that was reinforcing and reestablishing their trademarks and their hold over those trademarks that they acquired from TSR. So they rush third edition out before it's truly finished so that they can get that market presence, so that they can not let the whole TSR got bought out thing turn into a TSR died, TSR bankruptcy story, even though it wasn't a bankruptcy. They get that out there to keep people's interest peaked, to keep, to strike while the iron's hot when everybody's wondering what is Wizards going to do with TSR? What are they going to do with Dungeons and Dragons now that they have it, while they have that popular interest? Then they come out with 3.5 when they've largely sanded off the rough edges and refined the system a bit, and they open up the OGL, which just makes 3.5 by far the most modular and adaptable version of Dungeons & Dragons. It's by far my favorite. I think it's hands down the best. Once again, best is subjective, but I think it's the best because I think it is the best for the most people because it is so modular and so adaptable and so adjustable. And most of the problems that come from 3.5 come from we allow everything dungeon masters who let the inmates run the insane asylum and their players just pick whatever the hell they want to from whatever book they want to and mix, match, and combine until everybody's basically a god at level 7. That only happens if you don't curate what content you allow to the campaign you're running. I have personally had 3.5 campaigns that only allow 2 or 3 books, or only allow core books, or only allow 5 books, or have 50 different supplements that are allowed. You have to curate it to what kind of game you're trying to run, and you restrict the things that are outside of it to prevent the balance issues. That, of course, is the drawback of 3.5 is it's very, very labor intensive on a dungeon master to run 3.5. If the dungeon master is not going to put in a tremendous amount of time, effort, research, and work, the games can get way out of hand real fast.
It was also designed to be more compatible with other D20-based games. And 5 years after that, in 2008, the Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition was released. This was a significant departure from previous editions. It was designed to be more tactical and included many new mechanics, such as powers and daily encounter powers for characters. I've had no interest in ever playing 4th edition, though I have many of the book.
So 4th edition, I'm with him. I really had no interest in it. I did play it, but I had no interest in it. I found out very quickly I didn't like it. It is probably the most video gamey of the Dungeons & Dragons sets. It's kind of funny because 5th edition is very video gamey too, but as a product of its time, being just a little bit behind, 5th edition is more like Skyrim and Fallout and some of the newer Fallout 3 forward, some of the newer era of role-playing games where we have better engines and stuff, whereas 4th edition seemed to be copying more of your Turn of the Millennium style, Final Fantasy type RPGs, not necessarily copying, say, a JRPG mechanic, but it's much more rigid. Like I said earlier about 2nd, 4th edition's biggest sin, in my opinion, is that it took the worst parts of what came before it and heavily codified them. It went to the super rigid rules and trying to be more of a rules as written game where there's rules for everything, and it shucked out the adaptability. So you didn't basically, it threw out the baby and kept the bathwater for a lot of what happened with the previous editions. And what you end up with is the tactical combat system, the tactical wargaming style. It's really ironic that 4th edition is so heavily hated when 4th edition is more like 1st edition than any other D&D game that has come out, in that it is very much like a tactical war game or a tactical miniatures game. 1st edition left behind the tactical wargaming. It left behind the tactical aspect and moved into the narrative, free-form, adaptable versions. and that was its strength. But we didn't keep the rule zero, flesh out the, use your creativity, use your common sense to flesh out what the rules don't have. That was the best part of first edition. We left it behind. We took the worst part, which was this is like playing Warhammer, only not as good as a tactical role-playing game, or not as good as a tactical miniatures game, not as good as a tactical combat game. And we threw out the best RPG stuff. So what we end up with is an RPG that's shittier than all the other RPGs, and a tactical miniatures game that's shittier than all the tactical miniatures game. And it's really kind of an amalgamation of not being good at anything.
In 2014, we received the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This is the current edition until one D&D is released. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, what? Okay, I'm hearing that they've changed the name to, are you ready for this? They decided to call it 5th edition. Yes, that's right. The next edition of D&D after 5th edition is, as of the time of this recording, slated to be called 5th edition.
Those assholes still don't know what they're going to call it. WotC is so obnoxious, and they're trying to gaslight so hard. It's a new edition. Just do what I do and call it 666th edition, because it's clearly made by Satan and his minions in hell.
Okay, so maybe we can call it 5.5. Anyway, the existing 5th edition was designed to be a return to the roots of the game, and in many ways, as I've been saying for some time, seems the most like my original 1977 Holmes Basic edition, more so than any other past version of the game.
So he actually contradicts what I just said there, but he doesn't. And here's how he doesn't. 5th edition, I think, feels the most like kind of an evolution of first edition, because 5th edition tried to take the stuff, like 5th edition tried to do the opposite of 4th edition. They did 4th edition, where they basically took all the worst aspects of previous editions and focused in on it. And then in 5th edition, what they tried to do is take all the better aspects and the more fondly remembered aspects of previous editions and focus on them. Unfortunately, they kind of failed in that, in my opinion, because they didn't make sure that everything worked together in a homogeneous way like it should have. It's, kind of too much of a good thing in a lot of cases. And they did they threw the baby out with the bathwater. So in a situation where there were some of these things that maybe people didn't like as much, mainly because players didn't understand it as much, and so they got rid of it, and they created issues. And a big part of it is, and this is where I think the major failing came for 5e, 5e is so radically player focused. It's so much about the players and so little about the game master that it not only handcuffs the game master a bit, it takes away a lot of the mechanical tools that the game master had. To the point that I'll say this: an experienced game master who came up on the previous editions can pick up 5th edition and run one hell of a game. They can do awesome with 5th edition. A brand new dungeon master coming in to play the game, picking up 5th edition, is going to get run over by his players all the time, because he's not thinking back saying, you know what, back in 3rd edition, I had this mechanic that would help. Or, hey, I know what the game master's role is supposed to be, so I'm going to yank back these reins and I'm going to keep control of my table. You don't get that with the person who doesn't have that experience, and 5th edition fails to give them those mechanics. So that, in my opinion, is the critical failing of 5th edition.
So with all that, think about those past editions in mind, let's address the subject of this video, the big question: which edition of D&D really is the best? Are you ready for this? Now, this might be controversial. Some may disagree, but I can guarantee you I'm absolutely 100% correct about this.
He has got to say it's whichever one is most fun for your table. If he says anything else, then he just kind of needs to be backhanded around, because the honest truth of the matter is that is the only thing that can prove what is definitively the best. You have to add a word. You can say that an edition is the best at something from a mechanical perspective, but you can't say it is the best, because at the core, games are there to provide entertainment for the group. So you can say for my group, this is best, or for my play style, this is best. You can even say, in my opinion, for the most people, this provides the best opportunity. But to say what is the best is literally going to be whatever works for you. And if he says anything else, he literally can't claim to be objectively correct.
The best edition of Dungeons & Dragons out of every edition ever released, it's whichever edition you play, whichever edition you get the most enjoyment from. Yep, it's as easy as that. Contrary to what some people argue on social media and contrary to my feelings about 4th edition, the best version of Dungeons & Dragons is whatever version you're playing and finding the most enjoyment from. And you can apply this perspective to more than just this debate about previous versions of D&D. You see, people often confuse memories and feelings of their youth with material facts.
So I swear to God, I haven't seen this yet, and he's kind of hitting the nail on the head. And this is one of those things where the old school grognards, I think, missed the mark on a big way, is there are so many of them that remember the past with such heavily rose-tinted glasses. And they remember, it's hilarious because they'll come in and talk about how you got to have rules as written, and how if you're not obeying all of the most obscure little things written in the back of the book, the tiniest little, one-to-one timing or whatever it is, if this isn't how you're playing, you're not really playing it. And they're forgetting the fact that they completely wrote that out and never played with it before. They just haven't, a lot of them stopped playing or have played different games and different editions and stuff, gone back to D&D, and they're thinking, how did I play this in the 80s? And it's like, oh, I clearly played it by all the rules that are in the book because that's the soapbox that I stand on. And they're sitting here championing rules that they themselves got rid of years ago, and they've just kind of rewritten, gaslighted themselves into it. And it's funny. It's one of the places where the basic expert is actually correct. Now, he's also wrong. I think the basic expert is 100% wrong in his philosophy. I just disagree with him in his religious and strict adherence to rules as written. But he very much points out this when he talks about it. And at least he's honest about it, because he says, I didn't approach any of this stuff with nostalgia glasses. I started playing in 4th edition. So when I decided to start going back to the old editions, I literally ran it just as it was in the book, which a lot of these guys who have all these fond memories and talk about how great it was, I'm like, I listen to them and I'm like, wait a minute, that's not what the rules say. And he's absolutely correct.
When you see people arguing that 5th edition sucks and only 1st and 2nd edition AD&D are any good, just remember, those people are incorrectly conflating their memories of youth with the game mechanics. When I came into 5th edition, there were plenty of things I didn't like. And that was a bit off-putting at first. But you know what? The same was true of previous editions as well. They all had their problems. And we all may agree or disagree as to what those issues might have been. And this will continue to be true of future editions as well. And that's why we have house rules. That's why the game encourages flexibility. Everyone can play their game at their table the way they enjoy it most. One of the really great qualities about Dungeons & Dragons is the game is played in a variety of styles, with many adapting their own house rules. The afterword of the AD&D 1st edition Dungeon Master's Guide says, it is the spirit of the game, not the letter of the rules, which is important. Never hold to the letter written, nor allow some barracks room lawyer to force quotations from the rulebook upon you, if it goes against the obvious intent of the game. And every edition of the game has approved and supported this interpretation of the game. It's the spirit of the game, not the rules, that are most important. Don't like an official rule? Change it. Just try to be consistent. As a DM, you need to create an air of verisimilitude in your fantasy gaming world.
No, he actually touched on a bunch of the buzzwords there too, which is kind of funny. Buzzwords from both sides of the fence, which just kind of shows that there's a good neutral balance here, and that tribalism can cause a lot of the problems. Consistency is absolutely key. I've said that on every video about homebrew rules and Rule Zero and that sort of thing. And he also quotes Rule Zero and very correctly points out that and I'll go so far as to say this, To my knowledge, and I have read through rules for hundreds of tabletop role-playing games, ranging all the way from the very obscure that 15 people have a copy of, all the way up to Dungeons and Dragons, most marketed versions. Every last one of them has a version of Rule Zero codified in their guide somewhere. Okay? Rule Zero, homebrew, adjusting things, changing rules on the fly, and making rulings is rules as written. Period. This is where I say Basic Expert is completely wrong. Rules as written is Rule Zero.
I'll cover that in a future video. Every argument involving disagreements over which edition is best could be time better spent playing D&D, whichever version you enjoy most.
That I disagree with. We do need to have discussions and productive debate over things like editions and rule sets and different TTRPGs. And the reason is because these are the things that make better games. These are the things that provide data for adjustments to future editions. Dungeons, even wizards who have just become fucking awful at this. But there's people there who have their ear to the ground and they hear things. And those people who make the loudest arguments and have the most arguments are going to be heard. And then whether or not they choose to take that person's argument as the one they go with is a matter for debate. But that's where they get the information on, well, what's the problem that we need to adjust? This happened with 3rd edition and 3.5. Now, I think it happened was, like I said, Wizards of the Coast was almost actively using the player base as a playtest by throwing 3rd edition out there. I think it served several different purposes, but because they knew they were putting out a game that wasn't finished and wasn't truly ready, they really had their ear to the ground to say, we need to listen to people and figure out what needs to be adjusted and fixed and adapt that into this 3.5 that we already know we're going to do, because that is, that's how we're going to complete this game and please the most people and make it the most versatile. And when you look at it from that perspective, like, we absolutely need to have these discussions, because even if Wizards shoves their head even further up their own ass and they may be watching us through the backside of their teeth, but their ears are clogged up and they don't listen to shit, there's still going to be a Shadow Dark. There's still going to be a Colonies and Conquerors or Castles and Crusades. There's going to be Troll Lord. There's going to be Artel Sword. And there's going to be other game designers and small indie designers out there who are listening to these debates. And instead of getting stuck into the tribalism of this side or that side or this side or that side, they're going to listen to those arguments and pick out the good pieces and say, what value can I glean from this point? What value can I glean from this point? Now, that said, that only comes from productive discussion and debate, which doesn't include drawing hard lines in the sand and just refusing to listen and, sputing off grognard and woke-tard for the entirety of the discussion, or doing credentialism, or I've played for this long, or I've run this many games kind of nonsense. It literally has to come from productive debate where we disagree and try to find common ground, and we make points for our point of view to support them. And then it's not that the answer lies somewhere in the middle, but my answer might be somewhere in the middle. I may, your version and that person's version may not work for me. Neither one of them may work for me. But by listening to you debate the merits of each side in a responsible and respectful, well-reasoned fashion is going to help me find the place in the middle that I need, and then I'll put that in my game. And maybe the next game that comes out is the great one.
The best edition of the game will depend on your personal preferences and the type of game you want to play. It's worth trying out a few different editions to see which one works best for you. Just like it's best trying out different RPG rule systems and different settings, especially as a game master. In the end, we're just glad you're playing D&D, no matter which version you're playing, because it's an amazing game, a terrific hobby, and I'm forever thankful it's been there throughout my life. And with that in mind, I'll be making a video about how D&D has improved my life and the lives of others. Look for that when it's released.
Okay, so that's one of those things that we go back to the truth of the video is that the version you play is your best version until you find another one that suits what you're trying to do better. But we're going to do some more videos talking about the different editions just because I think it's a fun topic and it gives us a little bit of a break from the current fight over Wizards of the Coast being evil bastards again and over which YouTubers have decided to be complete shills. I did find a lot of amusement in the dual review that Professor Dungeon Master did of Shadow Dark and D&D 666 edition that he put out. I recommend you go take a look at it just because I find it's kind of funny when he blurs out the pages and covers of the new player's handbook and puts stick figures on top of it. I just think that's kind of a hilarious little tongue-in-cheek backhand. But let's go forward. Tell me below, what is your edition? Why is your edition the best or the best for you? What do you think each edition has in terms of strengths and weaknesses? And I think that'd be a fun exercise in the comment section. Do me a favor. I'm asking you as a personal favor. Drop in the comment section below and just put it down there. 1:2:3:4:5. Each edition of Dungeons and Dragons, just in 1 or 2 words. What do you think they did the best? What do you think they did the worst? And try to do it honestly and give credit where credit's due. And don't just go down there and put 4th edition, best thing it did best, piss everybody off. Thing it did worst, make a good game. Let's not do that. Let's try to be a little bit more graceful. But like, share, subscribe. See you guys next time. Can't wait for the next one.